Welcome back, guests. Hello, Geoff.
Uh, Good morning, good afternoon, Mike. Whatever
You
time
look
it is, whatever time zone Kate's in, I'm in, you're in.
you look
I think we're both in
relaxed and
Pacific right now.
ready to pounce as usual with your
Yeah,
cat-like reflexes.
not so much.
We are missing the third amigo here, Kate. Kate is actually, let me just check. I'm going to refresh my screen here. Kate is in an airplane that is going to land in about 36 minutes. We're eagerly awaiting her arrival. We've got the red carpet out at YVR waiting for her from her long trip in the East Coast. So, if everything works out in the deplaning, we might have Kate in the strategy suite. So, come on, YVR, get her out of that plane, get her into that Air Canada lounge. So, stay tuned on Kate. Now, today in the strategy suite, with or without Kate, we're going to talk about the legislative sitting that just wrapped up. We're going to talk about BC's number two attending the meeting of the number ones in Saskatoon at the First Minister's meeting. Elections BC released some stats on early birds and other things this week. And hotel rooms in January in Prince George. What's going on? But first, our guest today is Langley-Abbotsford MLA Harman Bhangu. Harman was elected as BC Conservative MLA in October 2024 and appointed transportation critic by John Rustad. Prior to being elected, he was in the heavy load trucking industry. He's been mentioned by more than a few people to me as one to watch in the BC Conservative caucus. I think that's a good thing. Harman, welcome to Hotel Pacifico.
Thank you very much for having me on there, Mike, and I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
Well, on the one to watch comment, what I've picked up is that you are one of the original drivers behind the scene getting the BC Conservative or party in a position to compete in the last election. And then you went on this crazy um, ride last fall that almost led you to victory at the polls. But what got you involved in BC Conservatives in the first place?
Kind of felt politically homeless during the BC Liberal era of the last little while. Kind of felt like, a lot of the youth, we would do a lot of work behind the scenes, but whenever it came down to get an opportunity or to run or anything, you weren't really given that opportunity. You weren't given that chance. And then when I started, I took a time away from politics, started, I got married, had kids, my dad passed, had to do a lot more with the family business. And then I ended up running into issues with the business I was and politicians. And I ended up running into a friend of mine, Aaron Gunn. And he asked me to be on his Politics Explained series about the carbon tax. I kind of went in there and explained to people how it affects a lot of industries and construction, why it's a huge cog of rising inflation in our infrastructure and our roadwork projects. And that kind of just led into me getting back into politics and getting more involved. And I was talking to a lot of my other friends that were into it before, and they're kind of had the same sentiment. And I know there's a generational shift that's kind of happening, especially in the Sikh community. A lot of the Canadian-born generation now, like myself, we're at the point now where we're the ones running the businesses for families and our parents and uncles and everything else. And we kind of want to have a say. We grew up with other Canadians, whites, and people of all walks and races. And we were able to manage that, get through it just fine, and evolve as human beings, Mike. That's the missing piece here. If I wrote off every person that said anything negative to me in my life, I'd literally have no one around me. But my approach is, let's lend out that olive branch. Let's reach out there and help others understand other ways of life, other cultures, and everything else. And right now, society has me wanting to believe that everyone was against me, and I just don't see it. I think a lot of Canadians are very accepting. They're amazing human beings. They're really receptive to everyone. You're gonna have bad apples no matter where you go. You can go to any country around the world. And we need to stop putting the good people here who allow people of all walks of life come here, have religious freedom. I can celebrate Vaisakhi, Diwali, anything in this country, and lots of others join us. Why don't we highlight those things? Why don't we celebrate those things? I think that is the missing piece in this recipe of getting everyone united. Let's celebrate the things we do well together. Only thing that's been highlighted is the negative, negative, negative. You have John A. McDonald statues being torn down. That man let people of color, the indigenous, have a right to vote. Why don't we celebrate that as a human being, how he evolved and he realized he changed his ways? I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's a great teaching point, Mike.
Harman, some of what you're saying resonates with what we heard from Aisha Esti when she was on the show about
Mhm.
activists frustrated with the direction of the BC Liberals and then the BC United. But the way you're describing it makes it sound more like a generational change than a split. It's usually discussed as a split, but from what you're telling us, it's really a change in attitude and a rise of a new group of leaders. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. I think we want to, for so long, politicians, the same ones who created these issues, created this inflation, keep telling us we're going to be the ones to fix it. I think it's time for the next generation whose future is really at jeopardy to get involved, have their voices be heard. And you look at our caucus, we have a lot of people from all walks of life who have a lot of like industry professionals. Like Ward Stamer is just a bunch of knowledge to be around forestry and everything else. The guy has abundance of knowledge. He's been a mayor and he's industry professional. We got a lot of people like that in our caucus.
So, so John Rustad became leader during that time when the Conservatives were still 0 seats and no one gave them a chance of making a big breakthrough. What do you see in John's approach or John's leadership that creates that environment that you were just talking about, that where you want that freedom that you
Mhm.
didn't feel that was there, available to you before? What is it about today's Conservatives that are the flag for you to carry?
Well, he's like it, micromanagement, like in sports. I come from sports. Sometimes you have coaches that just micromanage too much. They don't let people unleash their potential. John's letting us unleash our potential. He's letting us get out there and reach our constituents and raise issues that normally parties wouldn't let people. And they don't let them have that freedom. Everything has to be screened all the time. I understand there is some checks and boundaries to have. But if you can't represent the people that supported you to get elected, then what's the point of being here? It used to be people in communities would get together and have an issue. They would rally up people in other communities, and more MLAs and elected officials would hear about these issues. Then people would get to the table and base policies on that. The people need to be in the mix, and that's what I want to do is bring a voice to the people who haven't had a voice for a long time. People like myself that come from a union background. We were always told to vote a certain way, but we've seen firsthand the policies has made our life more difficult. You saw minimum wage double, and our wages aren't. So our buying power, every single time you go to that grocery market, you go to a place to eat, you're paying more for that labor, and that cost isn't reflected in our labor increase. That's a huge thing. Buying power is shrinking for everyday British Columbians, and a lot of these policies are having an effect of that. Everyone wants to say, like, I never, when I grew up, people told me you can work at a fast food place, you can work at a Starbucks or a Tim Hortons as a career. It was known to be a place where you have a little bit of flexibility. You can go to school, you can play sports, you can have other things in life going on, and you can still, then it was go to school, get a trade, start a business. And that's what we need to work towards. We can't have every job as a lifetime job. You need to have the reality of life because, nowadays kids are going in the real life and it hits them hard. Well, maybe we need to educate them towards that.
I look at the last session, though. I'd be interested in hearing your take on how it went from the conservative standpoint, based on what you've been saying about Rustad's leadership style and lack of micromanagement. In some respects, it felt like the three MLAs who became independents were critical of his management style or his leadership style. Um, what's your takeaway at the end of the first session? How have the Conservatives done? Is the message you've just been telling us about getting through? And are you in good shape to go into the next session coming up in the fall?
Morale's really high. I see we communicate a lot. A lot of MLAs, we come together on projects like I did with a lot of the Kootenay MLAs when we had issues with the ferry strike. You're seeing a lot of collaboration in a lot of the work that's being done. People all across the province that have been elected in our caucus working together, communicating, say, hey, are you hearing this in your neighborhood? Are you hearing this over here? There's a lot of great things that are happening, and I think we're really well positioned. And I'm proud to be a part of a party that is actually trying to get out common sense policies, standing up for them, finally pushing them forward, pushing back at the bills like no other party has done before. We're really active. We took a stand against Bill 7, Bill 14, Bill 15. We were even able to get the NDP to join, I mean the Greens to join us on some of it. And it just goes to show you we're there to work for British Columbians. We want to do what's best for British Columbians. And that is our goal. That is the motive. And also it is to get in government eventually. And we are a government in waiting. And that's exactly how we want to perform for British Columbians. That's what they expect from us.
Harman, by my count, of the 41 MLAs in the Conservative caucus today, I think about 33 are first-time MLAs,
Yeah.
which is, over time, these little forest fires happen once in a while where everybody gets cleared out and a whole new group comes in. So what's the learning curve like? Like you're a brand new MLA and now you've got 6 or 7 months under your belt. But what surprised you? What weren't you expecting when you showed up in Victoria? I'm kind of curious, like not many people have this experience you're having, so I'm curious from a human level how you're finding it.
Well, it's a bit of it's a little bit of adaption, but for me, running your own business, like the hours kind of haven't been too overwhelming because when you run your own
Mhm.
business, especially in trucking and working days, nights, afternoons, whenever it is, especially road working and paving. So that wasn't the biggest thing. I was able to actually have structure again in a way. You wake up this time, you're doing this during this time. So that was a little bit easier for me. The little things that I found kind of, upsetting, especially being elected, is when these bills like 7, 14, and 15, where I'm pretty much sidelined now. I can't even represent my constituents. That is kind of upsetting. Seeing the things that don't really
How so?
work.
Because of the time allocation
Well, now it's all in cabinet powers.
oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
Cabinet can run wild and do whatever they please. And, it's hard for communities to really get their voice out. And now you start thinking municipal elections around the corner. Well, what's the point of having them if they're just going to override what municipalities want, be the winners, pick the winners and choose, winners and losers of everything. It's kind of eye-opening in a way. Little things like even getting a constituency office, I would have thought by now I would have had one by now, but it's out of my hands. It's up to the legislature to find the lease, find the space and everything. I was able to help them on certain points, but it's looking like it'll be at the end of the year. And that was kind of a shock. It's like you're a year out from getting into an actual constituency office, which I feel is very important.
Hmm. That sounds like a long time. What
Yeah.
about actually you got to Victoria, you would have known some of the people that ran as conservatives, but probably a lot of them you didn't know when you got there. What's it been like with that group coming together?
It's been great. Yeah, I was actually fortunate being vice president of the party on the board. I got to meet a lot of people. But yeah, there were a few that I didn't, and it's been really great getting to know Scott McInnes, amazing guy with a lot of passion and energy. And he's one of those guys who really gets you to almost second guess. Like we have people that help our own people stay in line just by the way we communicate. We have that camaraderie. We go out and we hang out and we'll talk about issues and not just general stuff. Everyone's so focused. It's funny. We get together and we'll talk about certain policies, how we can kind of highlight what's good with them, what's not good with them, and just gelling with everyone. It's been amazing. Honestly, it's been a great, great time.
Who's the funniest member of your caucus?
Oh, Scott's up there. I
Is
have
he?
to say, I don't know what it is. He's just a big guy and he just gets everyone laughing. You see him on no context with some of his facial expressions. He's hilarious. I love that guy.
What
Okay.
what
Well,
is what
well,
is emerging as job one to take you from government and waiting to government for real?
Getting our messages out. The bridges that we started to build because we were pretty much flying the plane and building it at the same time. It's time we put some foundation, put some structure on it so we can walk freely into different communities and get our message out to a lot of people and get them more involved. What I always tell people in general is get out there and buy a membership. Get involved with the party. And this is a great time too. Our memberships are 4 years for $10, very low bar, and you get to come in and actually build it out with us. Get involved in your communities, and especially in maybe some ridings where we don't have MLAs. It's really important to get in there, start getting out to the events, engaging the community, and hear from them. Like we just got back from the legislature, but first thing I did is I looked up in my data and I was like, hey, these guys didn't vote for me. Let's go knock this neighborhood. And I went there with a sheet and I asked them, here's a few things and then a couple of others, right down the other. What do you want to see your MLA focus on that is provincial that I can do for you? What are the issues? And they filled it out. And I'm going to try and do this throughout the summer and engage people because we need to give the voice back to the people in the constituencies. I truly believe that. And that's the best way to represent them. And it's, yes, I'm a conservative, I have conservative values. But when you're back in your riding, you're not just a conservative. You're actually the MLA and you represent every single person, no matter who they are. It is your responsibility, your duty to listen to them. They pay your salary. So you work for them, is the message that I want to make
I
it.
notice you're very busy on social media too. Do you see that as a big part of your communication with the constituency and the broader public?
Yeah, I realize it's really close. You look at media right now. I don't want to knock media. I understand a lot of others, conservative minded, might not get into the media. Maybe that's why we don't have a voice, and you're seeing now they can't get in. But I think it's a great way for me to reach people who are just average, my friends. They share a lot of my messages, and because it resonates with them, I feel it's a good way to get your message out to a lot of folks that can then reshare it if it has value and purpose and it resonates with them. And then you really know what strikes people's chords. You know what did good, what didn't, and you can make your own assessment from that. I think it's going to play a really important part because the next generation, there wasn't the previous generation didn't have this information at their fingertips, but moving forward, they're always going to. And in elections, it's not about the next one. It's about the second, third, fourth, and the continuous ones down the road. And I think this will be a great way to reach people, and we've seen it in the past.
Guess, I've thought a lot about this, and I'm pretty sure the best science fiction is about time travel. From books like A Wrinkle in Time to movies like Back to the Future, I'm here for all of it. If you're with me on this nerd out, let me offer a shout out to a book by a BC author. It's called The Other Valley. It's such a good read, I promise. Without spoiling anything, stories about time travel often interrogate the relationship between the past and the future, and their more powerful triplet, the present. Presenting sponsor TELUS is finding new ways to turn old infrastructure into environmental wins that'll help the future and the present. They're removing old copper wiring and replacing it with pure fiber networks that are 85% more energy efficient. And like we discussed last week, they're recycling that copper and reinvesting the proceeds in communities right here in BC. They've successfully migrated 99% of eligible internet customers to pure fiber, and they're not stopping there. TELUS is investing $70 billion over the next 5 years to expand and enhance its network infrastructure and operations across Canada. Guests, our hometown team is making new and higher standards for network sustainability more than science fiction. TELUS is leveraging legacy infrastructure today for lasting impact.
You mentioned, encouraging people to join the BC Conservative Party. What's the membership at now these days for the BC Conservatives?
Oh, I've been so busy.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you,
But it
like
was
not being on the
obviously started
board.
off at a small base and it's probably
Yeah, I
grown a
remember when
bit.
we first started, it was under 1,000. Then me and a
Yeah.
bunch of people, Asia, Connor, Angela Isidoro has been a huge part of this too.
Yeah.
And he takes a lot of heat, and that's a perfect person to say who has evolved.
Yeah.
He is an amazing friend of mine, and we get along great, and he gets along with a lot of my friends who are my background great. And it's crazy to me how that man gets attacked. And he's a young man. He has a kid now, and I think he deserves a lot of respect. And that's one thing I will always stand up for is my friends who we all came here with. And I feel it's important you do that because, it's sad to see people out there still trying to cancel others over things they said when they were way younger. It's just really
So how,
disheartening.
so I mean, I've been through this myself, many, many decades ago, but when a small party, you know, makes a big breakthrough and you have to drag the infrastructure along with you and build it on the fly. As you
Hmm.
said earlier, fly the plane while you're building the plane. Um, how do you keep the DNA of the BC Conservatives while trying to grow and attract people that weren't part of it in the first place? Like, do you have any thoughts on that? Like how, I mean, there's probably things that you don't want to lose. Like you talked a bit about it already in terms of giving a voice to constituents and the generational change that you want to see. At the same time, there's other people now that conservatives are, in a stronger place are like, well, maybe we would like to come on board now. And maybe don't come from that place. How do you think you bring it all together?
I think just over time, when people are going to get more involved with this party, showing up to more events, showing up to more, getting riding associations, getting on those boards and getting the feedback in, that's how the parties start becoming. And we're still going through that process in ways. And I think it's important people actually just get out there. And this time it was very short. It was tough to do a lot of nominations. I did one myself, and I was really thankful for that. I think getting into that process will be able to build out
Did you
because
have a
you get more
contested
of a
nomination?
yeah, I had a
Oh, well,
contested nomination. I felt it
yeah,
was the proper thing to do. You can't just have
yeah,
a vice president. Oh, next thing you know, you're the candidate. I think it's
yeah.
good. We had a nomination, went through it, and it's important. Nominations are very important, I personally feel, because
Hmm.
you build out your base. Then when you're ready to
Hmm.
campaign, you already have a membership list of hundreds. Like, I was able to get 500 plus people signed up. I was able to send out those emails on for a super Saturday for whichever day, you'd have more chances of bringing people out to help you and support you. And then it was at a point where I was able to help people in other neighboring ridings, getting some of my volunteers in other areas. And that's what it takes in order to win elections. So we need to get people involved. If you want to see change, just get out there. It doesn't matter what it is you want to do. Hold up a sign, knock on doors. Every little bit helps.
So let's turn a bit to your responsibilities as a critic. You're the
Mhm.
transportation critic, which is a huge, huge file in terms of its impact on the province and the spending involved and the policy issues, you name it. Let me start with a bit of a political approach, like the take that we had as New Democrats when we were in that 2017 minority was that we needed to consult, we had a possibility to expand our support in the Valley, but we didn't know what it was going to take to achieve that support and get people's attention. And what we heard a lot, including from Mayor Henry Brown of Abbotsford and others, was that there was a feeling of resentment and neglect that transportation spending had been very much elsewhere in the province and not on Highway 1 and some of the critical investments in your neck of the woods. How big a deal was that? And what's your assessment of the NDP's transportation policy generally? It's a lot of money, and even more is being asked for on the transit side. Give us your elevator speech about how badly the NDP is doing.
The NDP have not completed a single project they put out. Patolo Bridge still not done, still incomplete, over budget, same four lanes. You look at the Broadway line, just announced today, 2025 to 2027. Maybe they'll complete it in 2027, make it look like a political stunt going into the next election. You look at every project they've even touched. Highway 1's been a standstill for over a decade now, and it's completely mind-boggling that it's only going up to Sumas. That is where the bottleneck starts. You ask everyone in the Fraser Valley that it's the main artery that connects Chilliwack into Abbotsford and throughout. That is where the real bottleneck is, and this project only goes up to there, and it's looking like it's going to be 2034. Look at the tunnel, still hasn't even been. They're just put in through the environmental assessment. They don't even know where the tunnel is going to sit, and they're already making the interchange. This government has no clue how to deliver on any infrastructure projects whatsoever. They've
So
completely
a good
failed.
list, but terrible execution.
Yeah, great list. But another thing too that hurts them is with the community benefits agreement, some of these, you have all these projects going. And with that workforce, that you have to have a specific type of workforce, you're restricted on how many projects you can work on at the same time. There's only so much of a workforce at times. It takes away, especially like when you have specialized like trucks and other things. There's only so many of them. You can't have all these projects going. It would have been a better approach for them to focus on a few projects, get it over and completed, and then move on to something else. But they're just trying to appease everywhere, and now they've created a major gridlock where nothing is complete. Patolo Bridge, will it really be open this fall? Let's wait and see. Because I asked Mike Farnworth during estimates, with the Broadway line, will it be on time and on budget? He said, on time, on budget, you better believe it. And now here we are, just a few weeks later. He's having to
So,
eat his own words.
so what exactly would the Conservatives do differently in how you approach these major projects?
Well, let's unleash some of our private sector. Like they're unionized workers too. Let's allow others to bid on these jobs and local companies too. There's a lot of companies that are locally Canadian. They always say Team Canada is Team Canada, Team Canada. Most of the companies that are involved are actually ownership overseas. They're not true Canadian-based companies throughout. And that is a huge issue. We want to help Canadians and
Do
British
you think the
Columbian
Canadian
companies succeed.
companies have the scale to do these large projects, though?
Oh, for sure. A few of them do. They do. A lot of them are finding ways to collaborate, and their sections, when you look at it, are actually getting completed on time and on budget. It's the ones where, there isn't the oversight, and that's one thing that's completely mind-boggling is the oversight on some of these ministries, how certain projects are going through and they're not being fully assessed. Like, how much money are we going to dump into consulting before we even get a shovel on the ground?
You're talking about Indigenous consultations.
No, just all consultation. It's not just that. There's a lot of things that end up being involved in a lot of these projects. And it just leads to more red tape, more paperwork, more burnt money. And we just get stuck in this area where it's just a sinkhole of money and it's taxpayer money. But that's the issue is another thing I learned in politics. There's not a lot of people that are in there that have had to use their own money, start their own business and think about, hey, do I have that product on the shelf for a customer who came in, have more inventory or a better service? I can provide this service. A lot of entrepreneurs, business people, they actually won't pay themselves. They'll live very broke. They'll reinvest. So they build those connections. That's what it takes to build a long time successful business. And when you look around, you see a lot of people had fancy CEO jobs, lawyer jobs, but you're always playing with other people's money. Now they're elected officials. They're playing with everyone's taxpayer dollars.
Well, I could argue with you about a lot of that, but we're not here to argue.
Yeah,
Like to get your
yeah.
insight on the transit side too, because there you have a different governance arrangement and a perennial call by the mayor's council for more funding and tremendous pressures as we have right across the board on infrastructure for ridership. I mean, transit ridership in BC has actually recuperated more quickly from the pandemic than I think almost
Mhm.
anywhere else in North America. What solutions do you think are going to be effective to bring the funding of transit investments into the right place? Maybe not as much as the mayors would like, but it seems like they're going to need more.
Well, right now we got to think as a government, like I've said it before on Mike Smith's, we got to think of where is the overspending within and where can we actually bring that cost over and adapt to different systems of transit and work ways. Like, a great way would have been if we had a bridge there that had a sky train that could shoot down instead of buses through the 99 where the new tunnel is going to be. There's a lot of areas we can do ways of adapting with transportation, but there doesn't seem to be an actual thought with it. We're doing the Highway 1 project. Was there ever even a consideration of any transit rail being integrated in that? It'd be great to get some of this congestion out of the communities that have transit that can flow in circular motions throughout. But it's getting the funding there. We're going to have to see within the policies and where we're putting the money and try and cut some costs within before always just shelling out money and just running up deficits that we got to start work looking at balancing the budget somewhere because my kids already are owing 40 to $50,000 and they can't even work it off right now.
Well, you mentioned rail or SkyTrain or whatever the rapid transit
I
technology. It
think
might
rail
be.
is going to be a huge part moving forward, is connecting our ports with rail. And it's going to be a great way to get industries, manufacturers
Mhm.
actually buying land in parts of BC again. Lower mainland is going to be really tough, but I think in the rural parts, companies would go out there and start manufacturing products if they had railway connected to the Prince Rupert port. Because right now,
Mhm.
Manitoba is actually doing a phenomenal thing out there. They're getting the railway system, they're bringing in manufacturers, they can send it right across to America to Chicago, then they're everywhere. They can get their product to market in every single place it needs to be. We need to start getting strategic like that over here. And with it would actually help with some of the lack of trucking we're going to have in the future of in the trucking industry. You have a huge portion that is aging out, and you have infrastructure that you need to provide to upkeep those trucks to be on the road. If we had a better rail system and we mitigated some of the trucks on the road, it would help in a couple different ways.
Well,
That brings me
just
to trucking. I got to
yeah,
ask
go
my
ahead.
trucking question.
Yeah, yeah.
This has been driving me nuts, Herman, but you're very experienced in the trucking industry. And for a long time now, and also Highway 1 question, there's been a rash, it seems, of trucks driving into overpasses and getting stuck. I don't remember that happening before. I know it's a complete non sequitur, but can you shed any light on this? What's going on?
Well, the issue is there's a lot of few different levels to this. The first one I got down in estimates as well is British Columbia, for some reason, has different height restrictions for the overpasses. So sometimes people are taking loads out to another place. They look at it and they forget about, hey, in this province, it's actually a little bit lower. And even to the states, that's something that we were able to establish, which is, it's a fact. And another issue too is now we have a lot of temporary foreign worker programs. And a lot of the people don't understand the terrain out here and also the signage, the way things work. And then you have carriers now who abuse these systems. Sometimes I don't even fault the drivers. They're told, you take this load or otherwise you don't have a job. If you don't
Hmm.
have a job, you can't stay in this country. It is that cutthroat. And you know what? It's happening from my own community, and I have to call it out because it's really disheartening and it's sad to see people being taken advantage of like this. I think back to when my parents came here, and if this had happened to them, how different my life would be. Would I have been given this opportunity to represent thousands of people as an MLA? No, probably not. And I think, it's the thing that we need to have compassion. People want to come here, they want to do the right thing. But when they're always abused by the people here, they have a resentment too. And we need to start calling these things out. And I feel like now we have the youth and people who are going to actually call this out because I feel this is important. So many people reach out to me all the time, say, Harman, we have to start calling this out. Imagine this was our mom and dad coming here right now. Would they have an opportunity? Would we be here?
Hmm.
And also, it helps Canadians in the same businesses, keeps that quality of pay, quality of workmanship at par too.
Well, thank you. This has been driving me nuts. This is the first time I've had a coherent explanation. It just appeared to be like a sudden storm of people
Because
hitting overpasses,
Because
but you've given
Jeff,
me a
you know what it
combination
is?
of answers.
Society's told us talking about this. Like, imagine if you brought up what I just said. People
Hmm.
would be like, "Oh my God, Jeff is this." I don't think so. I think these are conversations we need to have. This is the safety of British Columbians at risk, and it doesn't matter what race, what color they are. It could be anyone. This is the issue. We need to start talking about some of this stuff. Why have we been muzzled as a society? Because I'll tell you, my generation, this is how we all got along, is talking about it, learning about one another. Why are we stopping this? You see a lot of, liberal NDP and a lot of people say, hey, be yourself, be your individual self, but not your way of thinking and thought. I don't think everyone's cloned the same way. We have or individual ways of everything, but we just got to respect one another.
Yeah, trucking is so important. And yeah, anyway, go ahead,
Well,
Mike,
just
but I just
circling
need an
back to where
answer.
we started the discussion today was on this topic of being able to express yourself, right? and having that freedom to be yourself and to represent views of the public. And that does seem like the BC Conservatives do stand out in that regard, because frankly, in a conventional way, sometimes it can look a little messy. But it seems to me, though, that there's a bit more freedom to move in the BC Conservatives compared to the federal Conservatives, who seem to be very, very tightly controlled.
One thing I'll say for was when I realized the Kootenay Lake ferry strike was going on, there was a Harrison Proctor one as well. And they weren't conservative ridings.
Mhm.
But I talked to John, like, hey, there's a lot of people that are reaching out to me saying, hey, you're the transportation critic. And I was like, I'm going to drive out there and hear their stories. I'm talking to media, no one wants to cover it. I went out there firsthand, stopped in all this areas and firsthand listened to their stories. And we were able to document it, highlight it. Like, it was amazing for the Harrison Proctor. We were able to get a stay order working with Kyle Giddens and, Pete Davis, Scott McInnes as well. We did a little research in the community, figured it out. There was a period where there was a labor reading that was going to be made. The president of the BCGU was tweeting online against Steve Cooner, one of our MLAs, over something. And I just clicked on to it, looked at it. Then someone else replied. Then I realized it was someone from labor relations. And I realized that's the person who was making the ruling. So we called that out. That person was removed. Another person. So there was a stay order put in and they didn't have to go through the strike process. But then with the Kootenay Lake, just being able to go out there and document everything and highlight it, and John giving me the freedom and all the caucus supporting me on it, it was good. It was great because I had some actually friends over there as well that I've known. A lot of people are saying, oh, in football, there's not a lot of women coaches. Well, a coach of mine, Laurel, she lived over there. She coached me when I was probably 14 years old. So it was great to connect with a lot of people, and they just told me how it's affected, made great relationships. James McDonald over there, who has a son who's got autism, he wasn't able to get his kid to appointments. And just to get him to appointments, he was driving through snowstorms 4 hours each way. It just goes to show you how remarkable the people of British Columbia truly are. And just to give them a voice really was, it felt great to get out there and actually represent people. And some of them were like, hey, I'll never vote for you or your party. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like,
Mm.
that really doesn't matter to me. It's the fact that you were able to, get your husband who was getting into dementia, get him to the appointments, getting him to the important things that they really need. And not once did I think of it, hey, is this my base or not? No, that's not your job as an MLA. Your job is to get out there and represent the people of British Columbia. They pay your salaries. And if you can't work for them, then you shouldn't be here.
So do you have plans this summer to tour around?
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking at talking to a lot of our other MLAs, going to pay visits in different areas. They want me to see different infrastructure projects that have been promised, that have been shelved, or areas where they do need work. What's a good way of doing it? Having a little bit of background. I usually go and assess things. I'm able to talk to some of my friends, get their feedback, and just try and get things done. And I know Sheldon Clare definitely wants me to get out in Prince George again. There's a lot of issues over there. I know he sang a song about the bridge, so I actually checked out that bridge, and it's mind-boggling to see that there is no real plan anywhere in the future of 10, 15 years plus to do
Hmm.
anything about that.
Okay, well, good luck with your summer travels. And Harman, we really appreciate you come dropping by the Hotel Pacifico today to give us an update on what the Conservatives are up to and what you're up to. And we hope you'll come back and visit us again soon someday.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you
Harman.
very much, and the pleasure's all mine. And keep doing what you guys are doing, and it's been an honor to be on your show. Thank you.
Great,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. With increasingly intense summer heat and high winds, too many British Columbians have lived through the devastating impacts of wildfires. According to the BC Wildfire Service, 5 of the last 8 years have been record-setting years for the most hectares burned. More frequent extreme weather poses new challenges, and our sponsor, Fortis BC, is evolving its wildfire mitigation practices to respond. That's where the Public Safety Power Shutoff PSPS program can be an option. Fortis BC delivers electricity in the southern interior and knows that electricity infrastructure could be a source of wildfire ignitions, like when debris is blown into a power line during powerful, sustained windstorms when vegetation is tinder dry. So at a time where a single spark can lead to a catastrophic consequence, shutting down those power lines could make all the difference in the most extreme conditions. The option of proactively and temporarily shutting off power is a last resort to protect their customers. Nobody wants to be without power. FortisBC anticipates that this tool will be used rarely and only in exceptional circumstances. But it's important to have a well-defined plan in place well before an emergency situation arises. Wildfires are one reason customers could experience power outages at any time, and FortisBC encourages customers to always be prepared for outages. While this is a new tool for FortisBC, it's become increasingly common for electricity providers across North America. FortisBC is continuing to engage with their customers, stakeholders, and the public to ensure a balanced approach that prioritizes wildfire prevention and minimizes disruptions. For more information on wildfire safety practices, visit fortisbc.com/PSPS. FortisBC, energy for a better BC and a better podcast.
Hey guys, good to see you live from the lounge at YVR.
Live from the Air Canada Lounge in Vancouver, BC. Kate Hammer.
Peripatetic?
Peripatetic?
I think that's
Yeah.
the longest
Anyway,
business trip
well
anyone's
traveled.
ever had in Halifax. Like
The longest. Oh, well, it was a combo.
you were in Halifax last Tuesday when we recorded. Like, what the heck is going on in Halifax? You need to stay there for a week. I mean, it's a lovely city.
Well, can we maybe shout out Air Canada a bit on this one? Because what happened, they did that thing to me. I was supposed to fly back yesterday, and they did that thing to me where they just tell you your itinerary has changed. And then it meant that I was in the air when I couldn't be in the air. I had to be at a meeting, a board meeting. So I had to change it today. So it got a little bit longer.
Way to go, Kate. There goes our Air Canada sponsorship.
I mean, yeah.
There goes that out the window. Pacific Coastal, we're calling you next.
I think Air Canada will cover. They're pretty busy from what I can see. I fly them a lot and their flights are full.
Okay.
But I was sorry to miss Harman Bhangu. How was that conversation? Is he
I think he was full of vim and vigor.
as I would expect? Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
for someone who was in the leadership of the party back when it was just full of promise and aspirational project to today, he's got an interesting historical perspective, but also kind of an upbeat view about how things are going to pan out if they keep working the way they're working. So it was pretty interesting. I always
All
interested to
right.
meet some of the conservatives and hear what they really think.
It's
Yeah.
interesting that the transportation critic confirmed that all roads lead to Aaron Gunn.
Uh-huh.
So there you go.
Oh, he has a connection to Aaron Gunn too?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So
Oh, interesting. Okay, I
we
look
gotta
forward.
we gotta get Gunner on the pod. Gunner, are you listening? We're
We
gunning for
need
you.
you. We're gunning for you.
We're gunning for you, Gunner.
What do we
So
offer? We offer
we offer free
banter,
speech and civil
charm,
discourse.
and fictional pillow mints. I don't know.
I want to know why 60% of the North Island voted against Aaron Gunn, so he can explain that to us too as well. So
There you go. Thrown down. There's the hook.
come on,
There's the
Gunner.
hook. Tell us, Eric. Come on, come on. And why do all roads lead to you? Tell us more. What other roads do we
Well,
need to
it
explore?
seems like Aaron was very influential in recruiting people to get on the ground floor of the BC Conservatives, and Harman was one of them.
Yeah.
And he was VP of the party with Asia as president. So, yeah, there's a young group there that is a generational change in the BC Conservatives, and we'll see what's next. You'll have to listen to the interview, Kate. You should check in. Check into the hotel tomorrow. Listen to the
check
interview.
into the hotel. I look forward to it. All right. In the meantime, actually, I've been thinking about all the things I get to pick your brains about today, about current events. And I want to start with the thing that's kind of top of everyone's news feed right now, which is the First Minister's meeting in Saskatoon. And I want to start with you, Geoff, because I think there's a really interesting decision that was made there. I know the Premier Eby had his sort of Asian his tour in Asia booked way long ago, but they did make the choice for him to go do that. I did appreciate the photos of him, at Arc'teryx and eating chips and everything else, hard bite chips. But was it the right choice to have him do that and have Nikki Sharma go to this First Minister's meeting in Saskatoon?
It's hard to say. I mean, Nikki Sharma will do a great job representing BC's position, but there's number one and there's number two, and there's the heavy hitters are there. Legault, Doug Ford, uh, Danielle Smith, and Scott Moe, all important players in the economic discussions that are going to occur. And one of the issues that arose was whether or not there should be another bitumen pipeline through BC. And Carney's position on it, Mark Carney's position on it, is a bit nuanced. He keeps talking about it being decarbonized, which I assume means it's been through some kind of, uh, carbon capture and storage arrangement or something like that. But we could talk a bit about the pipelines. I mean, the BC's
I think they
position.
put the communicate through carbon capture, Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay, but
I
don't get
think
ahead of me
they
on this one, 'cause
decarbonize the messaging.
don't get ahead of me on this one though, because I think specifically, like I mean, Jeff and Mike, you both would have experience with this. There's an important part of the alchemy of the people around the table, and kind of if this is going to be an ongoing conversation with Carney and Eby stepped out of it, is there a bit of a I mean, as good as Nikki Sharma is, and I don't dispute that, there's a bit of a like, you got to be the guy who's there because of that dynamic with the other premiers. So do you think maybe
so.
Yeah.
I guess my choice would have been different, and everybody can have their own view about what's the right way to go. But an Asia trip is a good way to disappear completely from the news, honestly, and they've been getting some pretty good coverage. But
yeah, but it's even more fundamental than that, though. Like I've had the rare, because BC hosted the year I was in the chief of staff chair. I was actually in the room with premiers, and it is a rare place to be. To be amongst the first ministers, especially with the prime. I mean, usually when we did it, there was no prime minister in the room.
No, we very seldom had a prime minister.
Yeah, so to have a prime minister meeting
Well, and
with
on
the
this
premiers
topic, yeah,
at this moment in time, with market access to the Pacific being one of the key issues, I think he had to be there. And I know it's tough, real pain in the ass dilemma for them to be in. But frankly, Asia trade missions come and go, and they're not as important when it comes down to it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if they're doing stuff in Costco to show just they're doing PR for BC products, they're not. I mean, I don't think they're sitting down and doing deals with, multi-trillion-dollar energy companies in Asia. That's not the agenda of this trade mission. So I would have sent Adrian.
No, I think I land in the same space.
Yeah. Okay, we're agreed
or
on that
delayed
one.
it, or just said, very sorry.
Yeah.
Hope you understand.
Be there next week. Yeah.
I'll be there next week.
Yeah. All right. So, and then sorry, I did cut you off because you wanted to get a bit more into the substance of this discussion, but I wanted to pause because we have a clipping. We have a clipping this week, and the clipping is about that. I'll read. It's from Rob Shaw, and Business in Vancouver Glacier Media, and I'm going to read it out loud because I just want to give a shout out to Rob also for solid throwdown on a good lead on this one. I think. BC's foot-dragging, fence-sitting position on new oil pipelines collided face-first with reality this week at a First Ministers meeting in Saskatoon, where other premiers and the Prime Minister appeared to pretty much sidestep our province. I can read some more on this, but I think the gist is that it really seems like, Danielle Smith's probably pretty happy with how that meeting went. And she, I think later talking to the Calgary Herald, was sort of affirming how Mark Carney seems to be really siding with her on this and not with BC, her in Alberta and not with BC on this idea that this pipeline needs to get built. Mike, are you feeling like she's probably pretty happy with how that meeting went?
I think she gave it a 5 out of 10, which is better than
she's a
negative 72 she would have given Justin Trudeau. Well, look, I think Mark Carney went in there to lower the temperature with Alberta, and I think he accomplished that. That might have been one of his objectives. The other objective may be that he wants to get an oil pipeline to the West Coast too. And there's a lot of money to be made for Canada in exporting oil and gas to Asia and other places. And when a country's in a bit of a tough fiscal position and wants to diversify its trade markets away from the U.S., it's an entirely pragmatic response if you can also square the GHG issue to your satisfaction, and they seem to have some language in there on that. But clearly the world's changed, and lots is happening very quickly, and heads are beginning to spin, and they're spinning in Victoria, because I think the current message from Eby and Sharma is, well, there's not a project, we got nothing to talk about right now. And well, get your seatbelts on.
Well, BC is the only province that actually commissioned two huge pipelines this year. We're about to do the Coastal GasLink pipeline to Kitimat. We've got the TMX one, and we have nothing to apologize for in terms of
Yeah.
contributing to the success of the oil and gas sector. But that success is sort of the lowest hanging fruit for direct impact on the economy and revenues to government and so forth that we've been relying on for a long time. I mean, Alberta's not wrong to point out the tremendous contribution that the oil sands make to the economy. The problem has been that they also contribute to greenhouse gas emissions in a big way. So this is an interesting one because lots of political careers have foundered on this question. Whether or not you simply say, well, we'll put it through the process and see what happens, that doesn't seem to be the feeling anymore. It'll happen and it won't need very much process. This one up north, if it goes to Kitimat, or sorry, to Prince Rupert, which is what Daniel Smith is proposing, is going to test all of the groups that have fought tooth and nail against precisely this project, even before Coastal GasLink. Indigenous organizations, it's the Haida Gwaii Haida Council, the Haida Nation is going to be very angry because they don't even agree with natural gas exploitation. They're certainly opposed to any fiddling with the moratorium that's been in place since I think the 80s on tankers, oil tankers in BC's northern waters. So it's a very, very big question mark. I think at this point, the BC government is not quite sure how to say we are not interested in it if it can't pass certain hurdles. And that's what they've been trying to do. And I'm not sure that it's going to work. I agree. It's a vague
Well,
answer so far.
well, I think, just between oil and gas, there's a big difference.
Yeah.
And when this issue was on Christie's doorstep over a decade ago, she came out with the 5 conditions, which Alberta was very upset about. But it basically was like, hey, look, we know you want a pipeline, but what is BC going to get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, Alberta was very outraged that BC would even have the temerity to make demands on them. But eventually, those conditions were met. And but the fact remains that other than construction, BC is not. It's not. We're not getting royalties at the wellhead from oil. But when it comes to gas, we do, and we have a lot of gas in BC, more than we'll ever need. And that's why LNG was an important initiative, is because it really, the value chain within British Columbia is a lot bigger, and it's a lot more valuable to British Columbia to develop LNG. But the Eby government is dancing a very delicate dance right now over how it talks about natural gas. And I think part of the issue with oil is that they're silent on gas. And I think they're going to have to clarify their thinking about exactly where they're going on these issues, because I think the public's ahead of them on it, frankly.
The simplest thing for everybody would be for BC to say, well, we're very anxiously looking forward to a second investment decision to do phase 2 of the Coastal GasLink project to Kitimat, which would be enormous from an economic impact standpoint and require no extra pipeline. But I think that you're pointing to a problem that's a real one inside the NDP leadership and the caucus, which is that they're uncomfortable with further oil and gas development. And so they've been dancing around it on gas and not prepared to say yes to oil by any means. I think that'll be a bridge too far for some of those caucus people, probably.
Well, we'll watch with interest.
We'll see. One more piece that relates to this, though, I want to, because I think some of what, so I guess the Premier Eby spoke to Carney ahead of the meeting, and then Nikki Sharma went. I'm curious. I want to put together two pieces here. Let's talk about what all the premiers are meant to bring up 5 projects. So, what does it make sense for David Eby to be bringing up? What's he bringing up? And then the other thing is, can we talk about this too in terms of, because I think some of the critique or some of the pushback that Nikki Sharma was offering was this idea of shovel readiness, right? That the pipeline idea is such a distant thing, and really what we're trying to do is economic stimulus and kind of something that's a little more shovel ready. So what are we putting forward, and what do we have that's shovel ready?
Well, there was a letter from Eby to Carney in early May, which outlined some BC priorities, and they frankly weren't very charismatic. And I think BC needs a more charismatic agenda with the federal government. And by that, I mean just things that the public can get behind. And there's important things there like softwood, resolving softwood lumber, and um, clean energy. And they're also talking about rail and energy corridors, and we don't really know what that means, exactly what they mean by that. I think it's probably more throughput through to Prince Rupert, but Danielle Smith is very direct and very unambiguous with what she wants, and she's driving the agenda right now. And I think BC needs to figure out how it drives the agenda, and I think the electricity transmission is probably a big one. Which okay,
But isn't it critical minerals, Mike? I mean, there was that
yeah.
event which we talked about briefly, which is still a bit mysterious, a huge event about a week ago where the premier talked about the need for quick and urgent development of these critical minerals in the north. He had a huge audience there of Indigenous labor, business people. Not a lot new there, but what he's talking about is being turning BC into the engine of the Canadian economy, which is a big.
Well, what do we need the federal
big
government
goal.
to do to make that happen? That we
Yeah,
can't
I'm
make
not
it,
sure.
that we
Fair
can't
enough.
make happen
Yeah.
on ourselves, happen ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, and isn't the Ring of Fire kind of the big critical mineral project? Like, and I don't know, like how much ability do they have to pick a couple of
No,
these
our
things?
triangle's bigger than their ring.
Oh, is it? Our triangle's
yeah.
bigger than the ring?
And we have
Is
more than
it?
a
Okay.
triangle. We also have rectangles and other
Trapezoids. Okay, cool.
hexagons and things.
Cool.
Like,
Good
we got a
to
lot of
know.
minerals in BC. They
Do
have a
we?
lot in
Do
Ontario
we?
too. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
shitload,
Okay.
shitload.
Well, I know we had lots. I didn't know how the projects compare. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what volume and diversity of minerals there are between those two. Okay, we'll come back to this. But this is I think it'll be interesting to see how this progresses, because I would say, I think we're all in agreement. He probably should have been there. But I think the other thing is, I worry there's a dynamic emerging here around that table of first ministers where he's kind of the tag along.
Well, I think I think Eby's gonna have to get his elbows up with this crowd because Wab Canoe is
Oh man,
he's
yeah.
making an impact. Scott Moe's definitely aggressive. Daniel Smith, Doug Ford. So it's Legault's gonna be scrappy. So
Well,
everyone's got
and
to
some of
fight.
these things will be in the eye of the beholder. Like I've heard about national energy corridors or national corridors for a long time. I've never been quite clear what's involved, whether it's sort of like a free trade zone for energy transportation, but certainly unclear to me how that would work. And as you say, Mike, not charismatic. It's a regulatory thing at best, and whether or not there are plans to put stuff in that corridor, I don't know. Back east, though, things like putting a high-speed train between Windsor and Quebec
Yeah.
is very tangible and modern and forward-looking, and you can imagine yourself riding on it. I can't see myself really doing much with whatever I get out of the critical minerals.
Well, like would a nation building project be the Broadway subway to UBC? And it probably doesn't. There's a case for it because it will move more people than most contemplated public sector transit projects in Canada that are probably on the books. But is that going to capture people's imagination, right? So, or anyways, to be continued.
Interesting one. I love this. It's like the infrastructure Christmas lists, and Carney and Santa. All right. Let's because I think the other thing we need to mark is it was the legislative sitting has wrapped up. It's a good time for us to take stock on this. Can I start though, again, like thinking of stuff I'm keen to talk to you guys about? Can we start with Blurgate? Because I'm a little bit baffled by the whole thing. So I want to say, like, Blurgate is the government did get Bill 15 through, but there was a sort of last minute objection from the Conservatives on the basis that someone, who was it who had
Rick Glumac.
Rick Glumac had his background blurred, which is kind of standard operating procedure when you're on Zoom. But I think they wanted to make
You're not supposed to be
case.
blurred. You have to be, I think you have to be home or you have to be in your office or something. There's a rules.
Yeah. Okay. There's rules, and it would protect. Okay, sure. But it's interesting here because I'm just curious, Mike, if you can help me think through maybe what the strategy was here, because were they seriously wanting to then defeat the government
Well, first of all,
on.
this is not as saucy as the federal Zoom scandal when the guy didn't have his clothes
Oh,
on. Yeah,
yeah.
he
It's very
eventually
proper for us. We just have
resigned his
blurs.
seat, I think, over it, I think.
They have underwear. We have blurs. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
but this does remind me. I think I might have mentioned this in a previous pod of the Great Ham Sandwich incident of Corky Evans, when he famously went out to get a ham sandwich at the parliamentary restaurant and lost a vote in the House, and the BC Liberal opposition of the day was like, we're going to force an election, and Mike Farnworth is right in this case with Glumac saying, like, even if we lost the vote, we could just call a vote of confidence, and it's not like we're going to lose. We're not going to like lose power over our force an election because Rick Glumac's screen was blurred. So this is kind of, you get into the silly season at the end of a
Yeah.
session, particularly where opposition is like so trigger happy to like blow up everything into a massive deal that they're going for it, right? And I get it. It's good for them. It's making farmers' job harder. That's their job to do. But people
Well,
at home are going
I'm
like, whatever.
brings to mind the kerfuffle, which is nowhere near as serious in sort of electoral terms, but the dancing penis affair way back in the 90s,
Yeah.
where I think it was Ted Nubbling, former mayor of Whistler, but then a minister in the Campbell government, was
He
speaking on
was
some
speaking,
issue.
yeah.
The camera angles can't change, but some MLAs thought it would be funny to use one
Joy.
of these wind-up toys, which was, yeah. So the name Joy Thorkelton's past, or not,
Joy
yeah,
McPhail.
Joy McPhail.
But there were others in on it. Yeah, other.
Yeah, yeah. Well, strange things can happen in the legislature late at night, and that was not visible to the public, but visible to everybody else in the chamber, and led to a lot of confusion and short controversy and an embarrassing moment for some of those MLAs. Not Nebling, really. He was the victim.
He was the victim.
But what shows how crazy it was at the end, and there were two tiebreaker votes by Ross Chohan to pass two of the bills that have been so controversial, which were related to fast-tracking infrastructure development. And so I found myself asking, was this really difficult last week a win for the government or a loss, given that the relations with the First Nations became so fraught? Terry Teegee canceled out of the Asia trip. He's from the First Nations Leadership Council.
Yeah.
But I concluded maybe that with voters, they hear that there's a big fuss and the government's determined to push things through and get stuff moving. They may like that. And nobody's too worried about whatever the feelings are and the bruised sentiments over at the First Nations Leadership Council. I think
I've got a bit of a mixed scorecard on this one, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think you're right. I think voters are like, just make something happen, get some projects going. But I can imagine within the NDP, there's a bit of disquiet about it, especially when they see typical traditional allies upset about it. And, on the business side, I see the Mining Association endorsed it. I think the Vancouver Board of Trade endorsed it, Greater Vancouver Board of Trade. But the BC Chamber put out kind of well, we're concerned about the impact on First Nations, so we're not sure this is a good idea. But then I think they might have clarified it. But the BC Chamber's kind of got to like pick a lane. Come on. It's surprising when you see business groups not be a little more, even when the intention is there for government to make something happen, that's the moment that businesses probably should be supporting the center left government, to do something, even if they don't agree with how it's being implemented. And the Nishka came out and supported it, which went against the grain of the leadership, some of the political leadership of the First Nations. So there is cut in different ways. And, I think government wasn't a big win for the government. I don't think it was a big loss either. I think it's, if
Well,
they
I
can,
think there's two takeaways I had too, was that we didn't hear from Christine Boyle, the minister, at
Yeah.
any point during this thing.
yeah,
She's got a steep learning curve of her own because she's
Yeah.
been in the job for only a year, and it's an extremely difficult job. There also is the backdrop that I experienced. I don't know if you did, Mike, where, First Nations political leaders have their own constituencies. They have to be just as
Yeah.
rhetorically torqued up as any other political leader.
Yeah.
But when TG walked away from the Asia trip and they said they would litigate, and they were so tough to the end, I thought it was a different level of frustration.
Yeah.
There's a lot of demoralization among people who are not the NDP based necessarily, but generally would be sympathetic. I think that's true on drug policy. It's true on some of these Indigenous issues. And who knows what's left of BC's much vaunted environmental movement. These pipeline These controversies are a huge challenge to the support of Burmans and the many others who've had, really dug in against this kind of development. We'll see where they stand in the face of another oil pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, if Bill 15 ends up making First Nation consultation harder, then they will backfire. But rights and title holders will have different calculation to make than the Terry Teegees of the world who have a political constituency. But if it leads to more grassroots uprising and blockades and things like that, then yeah, that will set things back. So I think the government does have to lower the temperature on it.
Yeah.
All right. Can we pivot to another topic, which is Elections BC released the report to the CEO on the last provincial election. There's kind of 4 key takeaways. I can gloss over those, I think. I mean, no surprises there. The recounts in Prince George Mackenzie were flagged as sort of key challenges. The atmospheric river that day that I think was really, I guess it was North Van and Surrey.
Coquitlam, yeah.
Oh, Coquitlam, yeah. Some polls are affected there. Administrative challenges in hiring in remote areas. I think one of the more interesting ones is sort of the environment, information environment and disinformation, with the result that 7% are not.
Yeah, they ran a
confident in the
poll as
results.
how confident
Yeah.
people were in the results, and most people are, like over 80%, I think, were. But there's 7% that said they're not very confident in election results. So those are some of your hardcore, probably conspiracy theorists who buy into some of the rhetoric that comes out on the alt-right, that there's the fixes in or something like that. I mean, even the BC Conservatives, even though they initially said that they supported, the process and everything, then, centered around that Surrey North riding, started raising issues, legitimate issues, but, we don't want to get, in my opinion, we don't want to get to a U.S. level of paranoia about our elections run fairly. I personally believe they're run very fairly, but some people have questions.
I
Yeah,
was
I think.
surprised at how deep they went into this and impressed,
Yeah,
because it hadn't seemed to me the controversy was that hot. You remember right after the election, we commented, I think, on the fact that John Rustad, for one, said he believed it was a fair election. Aisha Estate took steps to tamp down criticism of the process.
Really early on.
Yeah, then they
credit
did
to her.
They did raise questions a little bit later after that. And again, I think part of it was about their concerns on the Surrey North, which is still in the courts apparently. The Surrey North situation, but
I'll defend them on that one though, because I think like it's important that they kind of came out and said like the process is good. I think Aisha in particular, right, was saying like, I'm watching the counting. It's all good. Feel confident, voters of BC. And then later when issues emerge, I think it's fair for them to be like, oh, I have questions here. Like broadly, I'd say that's okay, but I'm worried. I mean, this data point of 7%, do we have trend lines on that? Are there any historic data on,
I
like,
don't
is that
know.
up?
There might be, but there wasn't in the report. But I'll just pivot to another part of the report, page 40. Because I always look for when people voted and who voted information. So advance polls this time, what's the number here? Well, only 44% of all voters voted on election day. So more than half voted early. And I think we had the highest number of advance poll voters in history. And that's separate than 2020 when people voted by mail during the COVID election. I'm talking about specifically showing up in person to an advance poll. So the election's over for more than half the people before election day because the votes are in the bank. And I don't think political parties fully have baked this into their strategy, in terms of when they got to peak, when they got to be hitting their stride. I mean, I know the advanced polling is definitely on their radar screen, obviously, but the media, I still are playing up election day as the ultimate day where everything's gonna be decided. But boy, it's in a context of a 28-day RIP period, it goes fast, and you're like day 18, and hundreds of thousands of people are voting. So I expect this trend to continue. Like I expect earlier and earlier voting, which means that first week of the election campaign is so important now. You can't blow the first week.
Well, Mike, don't you think that Harman Bhangu pointed to a thing too, which is a generational change where there's not the same attachment to political parties that there was,
Mhm.
and voters are able to they feel much more at ease changing their mind. They don't worry about what their parents did or what the union told them to do. They are going to just make up the decision on the fly, partly on I guess, on the impact of that first week, as you say. But I think that's a separate issue of how much people feel a strength of commitment to a particular brand.
Mhm. Well,
It just one more point on this, because
Yeah.
I take your point, Mike, but I think one of the interesting things about if it's no longer like stick the landing for E-Day, and it's now like you got to consider advanced polling isn't one point in time either. So you're kind of moving to a place where you got to stick the landing and then like hold it for 2 weeks and then also not bore everybody. Like it's really hard to recalibrate
yeah.
to that type of finish.
Well, I would just to end on this. I would suggest, the TV debate consortium should be getting those debates earlier in the campaign. There should be pressure for, such as it will work, for parties to put out their platforms earlier. Because I mean, election day is actually 10 days before election day, for a lot of people. So,
Mhm.
anyways,
All right. Can I move us along to grab a drink? All right. Who's kicking us off this week, Geoff?
Okay, it's not provincial, but it sort of is because there's been a lot of buzz here in Vancouver all of a sudden about people wanting to run for mayor, which is still some distance away. Ken Sim has had a tough time over the last few months, and certainly I would say he's defeatable, but that doesn't mean that he's dead in the water. Ken Sim is in a good position for a lot of reasons, in my view, to fight a very tough campaign in 18 months when that campaign arrives. But some of the names we're hearing are Rebecca Bly, who was a member of Ken Sim's group but was expelled just before this recent by-election. And the by-election, which was taken by the left, by Cope and by One City, has really ignited all this conversation because it was such a decisive win for the non-Sim forces. She's one name. Don Davies, the NDP MP, who's now the interim leader of the NDP, is another name. There probably are others out there that I haven't heard, but certainly the political life is speeding up here in the city of Vancouver. So I just wanted to raise a glass to those who think they want to put their name forward in public life here in Vancouver, but also say, hey, folks, Kennedy Stewart tried this without a real party. Recently put out some free advice to Don Davies, which included the fact that he still has got a very deep debt from his really decisive loss 2 years ago to Ken Sim. So I just want to point out to folks who are thinking of taking that course that not only do political parties civically really need a mayoralty candidate, mayoralty candidates also really need a political party, and they can't be whipped up by add water and stir from something you order on Temu or something. So
Timu,
let's
wow,
just
nice reference, Jeff. Wow,
thank
very
you. Yeah,
contemporary.
no, I'm trying to stay hip here, but anyway, the sage advice from the old guy: you need a mayoralty candidate and a party. So both of those that are thinking of maybe doing it without one or the other, bad idea.
I
So
did it.
here's to you though for getting involved.
I did buy a Snickers floating cat bed on Temu, Kate. Just a little tip. It's good value. Hey,
I
look,
photo
Yeah,
evidence or it didn't happen.
if there's any municipal parties out there on Temu, I haven't heard about them, but they
I
might be
should
there.
I should raise a cup of catnip to Snickers, which I have yet to post the Battle for BC predictions final results. Just like the CEO of Elections BC puts out a final report, I will put out a final report on Snickers' success in dealing with Richard Zussman and myself during the federal election. So stay tuned. But for the mini bar today, um, I I will deal with what we actually previewed at the top of the show here, which is the hotel rooms in Prince George in January. So, for those, many of our listeners know about the BC Natural Resources Forum. I talk about it a lot. It is taken up to another level this year because when the hotel room blocks were released recently for getting rooms in Prince George in January, it was an absolute stampede. Not unlike the Who concert in Cincinnati back in the 70s, for those who remember. Innocent people were trampled in the wake of trying to get into the Marriott. I won't name names, but some of them might be on this Zoom call. So, for those who didn't get their room at the Marriott, just spare a tear for those. It's a very
Is-
successful
There
conference.
going to be some scalpers outside if
There
you're
might
really
be.
determined to go?
But the crush of interest for BCNRF is a sign of success, and I fully expect the cabinet will be back there next year because it's become a can't miss event in BC's political calendar. And there's another one coming up this month, a related conference, the Indigenous Resource Opportunity Conference in Nanaimo, which I'm going to attend for a day later this month that Dallas Smith organizes. He's president of the Nanamokolas Tribal Council. And it's another place to convene a whole bunch of interesting people. And the Premier's apparently headlining a keynote there too. So I'll report out later in the month on that one. So you could spend your whole life going to conferences, but like Kate did last week and spend a week in Halifax. But those two ones I've mentioned are pretty good ones to hit.
That's awesome. I got a double hitter this week. It's both raising glasses twice. So the first one I'll do is the StatsCan released the data on travel, airport travel last week, or this week, sorry. And the numbers are down across the board for flights to the US in the 4 major airports in Canada. So Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, and Vancouver. They're all steadily down kind of like 7-8%. And I'm raising my glass to those of us in BC because they're down the most here. Super proud of us. Keep it up. Good work. Glad to see those numbers. Glad to see us hit that. One other quick shout out, because I actually just got off a plane. I was flying Halifax to Vancouver direct. I was next to a helicopter pilot. And he had just come from delivering a helicopter from North Carolina to St. John's. And he was, instead of going home to Revelstoke, going straight to Alberta to fight forest fires. We had a really interesting conversation, actually, because he's they're trying new technology with night goggles so that they can fight forest fires at night. He was saying how that might be difficult in BC because of the mountains, but really interesting work. Anyway, it just sort of prompted me to think to just raise my glass to everyone who's mobilizing now to fight the wildfires in Saskatchewan and Manitoba and Alberta. There are some BC folks who are part of that. It looks like it's going to be a tough season. So I'm raising my glass to everyone.
Awesome.
Yeah, standing
And
up
there's
there.
firefighting drones coming now too,
Right.
that will be able to fight fires at night as well. So hopefully new technology is going to ease the damage.
Yeah, enable our ability to fight back. Okay, that's great. All right, thanks for letting me join from the airport, guys. Hopefully my will be calmer audio. I think next week or not next week, the week after, back to normal.
That's great.
Yeah, we're busy folks here at Hotel Pacifico. I want to thank Harman Bhangu for checking in, and to our presenting sponsor TELUS and Fortis BC. We will see you next week, guests, or at least Geoff and Mike will. BC, you can never leave.